man whose name sits deservedly over the title of a film called Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. I'm delighted in turn to give you a man I think I can say is Abraham Lincoln's Spielberg, Steven Spielberg.
Well, I've never stood any place on earth where it's easier to be humble than here. Gettysburg, delivering an address. Well, humble hardly covers it. And it's not just an understanding here where Lincoln stood when he recited what many people, myself included, consider the most perfect prose poems ever penned by an American. It's not just an unspeaking where Lincoln uttered words that helped change the course of American history by changing how we understand ourselves and the whole point of American democracy. I agree with those who read the Gettysburg Address this way, that Lincoln wanted us to understand that equality is a small d democratic essential, perhaps the democratic essential. Lincoln, in the address delivered here, wanted his fellow citizens to understand that equality was the proposition that the Civil War was meant to test. So that's reason enough to feel very humble, as I feel speaking to you here. But it's not the only reason. Gettysburg is, of course, a battlefield and a cemetery in which the soldiers who died in service of our country are buried. Their sacrifice of nearly 150 years ago was so complete and so completely essential that time, as Lincoln predicted, hasn't managed to erase it from memory. The name of this place still resonates with a shuddering in the hearts of the American people. Wouldn't any other name connected to the Civil War except Lincoln's, Gettysburg reverberates. Americans retain the knowledge that what happened here was the crux of our terrible national trial. And even Americans who aren't sure precisely what transpired on these fields know that all the glory and all the tragedy we associate with the Civil War resides most palpably, most indelibly here. The reason for this concentration of heartbreak and heroism in a geographical location is simple, and Lincoln told us what it was that day when he found his best and his truest voice. It's the courage, the selflessness, the strength, endurance, heroism, and the sacrifice of the patriots who were buried here, most of them terribly young men no older than my 3 sons. It's the memory of those honored dead, those in their graves, and those who have never been found that brings all of America always back to Gettysburg. And it's in the face of their courage and sacrifice, and the courage displayed and the sacrifices made in war after war since July 1863, to this very day, by the men and women of the armed forces of the United States, that I feel the deepest humility, which is only another way to express the very deepest gratitude to the citizen soldiers of the United States. These citizen soldiers in battle here were defending something other than boundaries, territory, or property, something other than religious belief, cultural tradition, and national identity. Lincoln contends that they gave the last full measures of the revolution to defend a proposition about government, about how we choose to live together, starting with liberty and moving to equality, and whether the contract we make with one another based on liberty and equality is practical, whether it will work, mechanically work, whether this idea of government can function on the earth we inhabit. And that's one reason why I think he keeps saying here in his address, here. It happened right here on the ground all of you are standing on the side of the all of us stand. These citizen soldiers fighting for the Union died attesting that proposition that democracy can work in the hands of not of angels, nor even to borrow from Lincoln's first inaugural address, in the hands of the better angels of our nature, but in sometimes clumsy, sometimes bloody, error-prone hands of the ordinary people we are. On this this sacred testing and proving ground, people willingly died to prove that people lived together better if they refused to oppress one another, to prove, in other words, that democracy works. I'm here also awestruck each time I visited Gettysburg to be in the presence of Lincoln's still eloquent ghost. And to be honest, I've been keeping company with that eloquent ghost on and off for the last 10 years, spent preparing him constantly for the past 2 years, devoted around the clock to making Lincoln. And even if this is merely an illusion or testament to the enduring force of his legacy, like most people who spend a lot of time thinking about Abraham Lincoln, he's come to feel like one of my oldest and one of my dearest friends. And I imagine I'm talking to many people who feel the same way. I'm luckier in one sense than nearly all of you because I have Daniel Day-Lewis's phone number in my speed dial. If I start to really listen terribly, I can just call him up and ask him to tell me a story. I haven't done this. I have no idea what Daniel would think of me if I did. He'd probably change his number, and I think I certainly would was going to be on his cell phone. There's an important component of humility, the gratitude, which I feel today in all of David's audience. It includes a number of serious scholars, not to mention a healthy percentage of the country's entire population of Lincoln obsessives. The population I and all the brilliant artists who made this film with me have happily joined. We are all Lincoln obsessives now, together with you. And the more diligent among us devours book after Lincoln book. But we are filmmakers. We are not scholars. We are not historians. But we are deeply indebted to those of you who are. And I've made no secret of how indebted I am to one historian, to Doris Kearns Goodwin, who gave me, my screenwriter Tony Kushner, my lead actor, and everyone who worked on Lincoln, a luminous and shrewd and magnificently constructed account of the man. We owe a great deal to Harold Holzer and to James McPherson, who led Daniel and me on an unforgettable tour of Gettysburg only a year ago. And Harold and Jim served as historical consultants on our film from the very beginning of the process 7 years ago, and their contributions were invaluable. And there's many other historians of Lincoln of the Civil War in America to whose work I owe an unpayable debt. You gave us the history from which we made our historical fiction, using the connective tissue of cause and effect, gathering evidence, categorizing, analyzing, and interpreting. You constructed the narratives that we turn to, that all of us turn to, filmmakers and teachers and doctors and hopefully business people and politicians. All of us, we turn to historians. We turn the pages of your diligently reconstructed narratives as we struggle to form our collective memory of all that has passed, all that which shapes our present life and will shape the future. We're forever in the process of entering. Nothing matters more than memory. Without memory, we learn nothing. Without memory, there's no coherence. There's no progress. I'd imagine that's ultimately why historians write history and why human beings hunger for history. And I have to add, for fiction based on history, it's the hunger we feel for coherence. It's the hunger we feel for progress, for a better world. And it's much the same hunger, in other words, that compels soldiers in a just war to fight. The hunger for justice. Because I think justice and memory are inseparable. Without remembering what has happened, what went wrong, what went right, the blessings that justice brings, dignity, real prosperity, individual and social health, peace. These blessings will not and cannot arrive. History lights the path toward injustice, so without history there's no hope. But even with history that's as scrutinized as that of the American Civil War, some aspects, certain details are gone forever. We can't remember everything. History forces us to acknowledge the limits of memory. It keeps track of memory's victories, it keeps track of memory's defeats. It tells us that memory is imperfect, that no matter how much of the past we've recovered, much that once was or has been now is lost to us. It's simply not the job, and in fact, I believe it's the betrayal of the job of a historian to promise perfect and complete recall promise memory that abolishes loss. And one of the jobs of art is to go to the impossible places that other disciplines like history must avoid. Through art, we enlist the imagination to bring what's lost back to us, to bring the dead back to life. This resurrection is, of course, just an illusion. It's a fantasy. It's a dream. But dreams matter somehow to us. And I'm sure many of you feel as I do, as everyone I know who spend time thinking about them feels, that the murder of Abraham Lincoln, the loss of Lincoln, is heartbreaking. And I admit that among the reasons I wanted to make this film, I wanted impossibly to bring Lincoln back into 3.5 centuries, even if only for 2.5 hours, and even if only in a cinematic dream. So does this mean that in making Lincoln I was attempting to deny the finality of death? And I hope not. Lincoln certainly could not have approved of that. One thing I've learned from reading about the 16th president and the Civil War is that as much as we need memory to live, we need an awareness of death to live. Surely that's what cemeteries like Gettysburg are for. They're places we go to remember the honored dead and also to remember death itself. But if we need an awareness of death to make sense of life, we also need an awareness that the meaning of life is not merely that we die. Lincoln, in the only speech by an American maybe greater than the one he delivered here, directed us toward the attainment of that awareness, to gaze with appropriate humility into the face of the infinite and to guess as we must in order to act at what God means for us and what life means. Lincoln suggested here at Gettysburg and in his second inaugural address, to try to grasp the meaning of our existence is the great task always before us all. Historians, artists, statesmen, politicians, everyone on earth, to try to comprehend the point of our struggles and our suffering, our defeats, our triumphs. The search for the meaning of our lives and of our deaths is the highest function of our capacities to reason, to remember, to imagine, and to dream. And now, I begin to recognize in the 2-minute length of the Gettysburg Address another aspect of Lincoln's genius, namely knowing when to stop. So I speak for myself when I say, and for the splendid crew of artists and newly minted Lincoln obsessives that helped me make our film, thank you for making it possible for us to remember and for assisting us and at times indulging us as we concoct our dreams. Thank you all very, very much.